Welcome to Main Street Podcast, an opportunity to talk to Idaho's elected leaders about the issues that matter to you. Welcome. It is Main Street Idaho. This is our podcast. Brennan Summers here. I'm here with Representative Greg Lanting out of District 25. I got that right, didn't I?
You got it right.
Representative, how are you today?
Good. 25, basically the city of Twin Falls.
How was the drive over?
It was quicker than I anticipated.
Were you speeding?
I left I tried to set it on 80.
Hey, good job.
I left 3 hours. Got here about 2 hours and 10.
Oh, that's perfect.
Yeah.
And it's no icy roads, which can be rare for this time of year.
Construction here and there, but nothing too bad.
It is still construction season.
Yeah.
Now, you are a farm boy from Filer, right? We call it Hollister. Is that what you're saying?
Hollister is the area that funnels in for schools into Filer, but I grew up out of Hollister on a farm ranch, and I think that set some of my worth ethic values. My father was a taskmaster.
Was he?
He made sure that I was busy all day, every day, and so I'm kind of used to that.
Did you enjoy moving pipe and hauling hay as a kid?
I did enjoy moving pipe. I didn't mind hauling hay. We were back in the days of the 80-pound bales and stack it on a truck and then bring it into the stack yard. But those I didn't buy. Pipe I never cared for. We only had one big long, like quarter-mile section of pipe. The rest of it was all just regular gravity irrigation. But no, I never cared because it's wet and muddy. Never cared for that. But hay wasn't bad. Made you a lot better in athletics. So you move hay.
Woke up. So that question was a test, because that was to see if you were going to lie to me. Because if you said you enjoyed moving pipe, then I would have known.
No,
you're going to lie to me, because I've never met anybody that enjoys moving pipe.
I don't know that I've ever met anybody either. That was always the one that the lines that we had was on pasture, and so we only moved it every once a day. And it was always it's 4 o'clock. It's time to go move the pipe.
So there are people that listen to the podcast that might be new in Idaho or just live in bigger cities that have never had an experience actually moving pipe. Describe the process of waking up early in the morning and going out and moving pipe.
Well, luckily, like I said, we didn't have to do ours in the morning much, but it's the pipe. You got to learn the technique to make sure you drain the water out of it each time, and you move it about 20 yards and have to connect it back in each time, and the ground's wet, and if you're doing it in the mornings, what I've done a little bit of, it's cold and your hands are cold, and because you really can't wear leather gloves doing it because you're going to get them all wet because you're out in a wet situation. But then you got to work on the heads that are not working properly, and so it's I have an quick one. I remember my cousin one time we were moving it together, so we were on branches side by side, and we were moving the pipe, and he saw a coyote running across there. So he quickly, back in those days, you always had a 30-30 in your back window, and he grabbed it and ran over off the road so he wasn't breaking the lawn, shot at this coyote like 4 times, never hit it. And then we noticed the main line just had water pipe. It was skipping into the main line.
Oh, no.
And my dad and my uncle were not happy. I took the blame on a part of it, just being with him. But that was
guilty by association.
Guilty by association for sure.
Well, you're whoever decides to run against you is going to start running ads. I can see it right now of you shooting at main lines water.
It was amazing. We watched him shoot at the coyote running across the top of the field, and then you look back and went, "Oh no! Look at the water popping out of the main line," because then you got to shut everything down to repair it and the whole thing. So,
yeah, I'm sure you feel a lot.
I'll blame that on Cousin Bob.
Cousin Bob. Well, we know you didn't enjoy pipe too much because you traded in your work boots eventually for combat boots.
Right.
Right out of high school, you joined the
Air National Guard
and the Army National Guard.
Right. Well, Air National Guard I was in between the two of them about 10 years. Kind of went back and forth. At college, it was a lot easier. I went to the University of Idaho, and it was a lot easier to just go to the local Army Guard unit there. So I switched back and forth between the two. I had commanders that were pretty lenient, allowed me to do that. But I finished up in the Air National Guard and started in there, and but in the middle during my University of Idaho days, I was in the Army National Guard. I preferred the Air National Guard. That was a little more, I was trudging around out in the deserts, not so much fun as sitting in an office and getting the work done. So,
what was the rationale in your mind at 18 deciding to join up in the service?
A couple of different things, actually. One, I just had a desire to serve, without a doubt. And so I fulfilled that thing. And then plus I wanted to go to college and I didn't want to be interrupted by the draft. And so this was something that you gave up 6 years of your life to make sure I drafted. I ended up giving up 10, but and I wish I'd put in the other 10 and retired. But, when you're 28 years old, a lot of times you have different things you feel like you need to do. So I didn't stay the whole 20, but I enjoyed myself. I learned things there. I mean, everybody should have to go to basic training. I'll guarantee you that will make you rethink a few things in your life without a doubt. If you've got somebody right in your face yelling at you about something you've done wrong, you tend to pay a little more attention to detail the next time around. So, yeah.
I can see that.
Yeah.
Are there times in the legislature that you think back on your service and kind of recall some of the things you've learned or appreciation you have for the service?
Yeah, part of one of my committees is transportation and defense, and we end up with quite a few briefings from Mountain Home Air Force Base as part of that, and that brings back memories of my time in the Air Guard, and we did quite a bit of stuff with Mountain Home Air Force Base there at Gowan Field in Boise as part of that. So, yeah, that part, I fairly kind of have found fond memories of my military service. I don't have any negative memories, well, except for, DI yelling in your face once in a while for doing something wrong. But, yeah, but Air Force Basic was probably, I remember at the end of the basic training, we were kind of sitting down just a group around the DI, and somebody asked a question. It was he was being a human for a short amount of time. And he asked the question, somebody asked the question. I said, my buddy just got out of Marine Corps basic training, and somebody else in the Army, and said they thought it was a lot harder than ours. And the guy was pretty straightforward. He said, they want you for your brawn, we want you for your brain. And so just the difference in the just armed services for America. And I was proud to do my part.
Yeah.
So,
and you went from the service, you did a full circle back to home, right? And
right.
It ended up right back into education.
Right. Came back, went to college, and started out at College of Southern Idaho there in Twin Falls, and then matriculated on up to the University of Idaho in Moscow. And then later on, I got my master's degree at College of Idaho, so I covered a lot of different places in Idaho for my schooling, but all had their benefits and all had their advantages. CSI is a great place to start. Class size, there's like 20, and they're bigger than that now, I'm sure, but that time, so you had a little more of a high school feel, and you kind of get your feet wet, and then by the time you get to Idaho and the bigger classes and maybe a little more rigor and things. So, yeah, I enjoyed that, and then I came back and right back to Filer and started teaching. So,
yeah,
college.
And we were talking about how, maybe unusual it is that you spent your whole career, both as a teacher and as administrator, in the same place that you actually went to school.
Right. Yeah, I was in that building for a lot of years. I was in Filer schools for 45 years. We didn't have kindergarten those days, but first grade through 12, and then back as a teacher, a principal as a teacher for 16, a principal for 17. Almost all of it at the Filer Middle School, which was my old high school.
Oh.
They built a new high school, so I spent a lot of time in that particular building.
So it's safe to say you never got lost in that building. You knew where everything was.
I knew where the crannies were, and I knew where the hiding spots were, and especially the ones I'd found as a student. But
now, how do you think your your middle school principal, your middle school teachers would have described you as a student at that time?
Really skinny. Decent student, but I didn't strive for A's like I did later and things. And then I would hopefully say just a good kid, because I felt like I was in trouble, but never pushed the envelope too far. And I really related well to that kind of a kid at a middle school, because most of the time the middle school as a principal, you're coming down on a kid. They've done something stupid or dumb. They haven't done something evil. And it's a lot easier to deal with dumb than it is evil. So that's a part of the reason why I probably like being at the middle school as opposed to high school.
Middle school is a tough age. I think back to like my prepubescent pimples percolating my face and just it being just a hard time. Being in the classroom and then being an administrator, what kind of approach did you take to making these kids' lives just a little bit easier?
Well, you had to get to know them. Two, the thing I liked about middle school kids, if you had to come down on them hard on Tuesday if you treat them like nothing happened on Wednesday, nothing happened. They're young enough, they mold to it. When I hired teachers, I always try to make sure they had a sense of humor, because you got to have a sense of humor with middle school kids, because they're going to do things that are, you just go, oh man, but you got to be able to laugh at it and then provide the consequence. And so, I just enjoyed that age. So I can't really, I don't know that I can explain any more than that. Just the fact that they were just a good group to work with. And, I have kids that'll come up to me now. I remember the assistant fire chief of the city of Twin Falls was one of my former students, one of my classroom students, saying, you were my favorite teacher. And I go, man, I can't hardly believe that. I don't think I was that good, but I think I related to him, and that made a difference for him.
And you taught geography, U.S. history, and government.
Government. I spent 1 year at the high school. I taught government at the high school.
Okay. But U.S. history was something you taught in middle school.
Right.
That's a pretty important subject, particularly for kids that are at that age finally trying to get a grasp of what it actually means to be part of this country and our background. How did you find that rewarding in the classroom?
Well, I tried to mix it up a little bit, and I think that helped me. I did a lot of current events because I thought it was just as important to know what's going on now as what happened 150 years ago or 200 years ago. So hopefully just light a fire of some variety to have a spark of interest, try to make it interesting, try to make it something that they might remember. That's what I enjoyed about it. A lot of kids, when you're in junior high, if you think back to your junior high, I can remember instances in my junior high, but I really can't remember a lot about middle school or junior high. And so you try to do some things they might remember to make history come alive a little bit. So.
Yeah, and current events, so important to develop.
We started every day with current events, and they knew if they had read the paper that morning, that they're talking to their parents about it, I was going to give them a little extra credit if they could bring something up. Instead of me bringing it up, they brought it up. So,
that's great.
Yeah.
Were there times, maybe even more so as a principal, that you thought that you were frustrated and thought, if only I could be in the legislature, this is something I would fix. This is not working.
Yeah, a little bit. I had a lot of the legislators, I had their actual cell numbers back in that day, because I'd been, like Burt Brackett was a representative, not our exact district, but close by for Filer, but not for Twin Falls where I was living. I had his email address, and if I emailed him, he would always call me immediately back, because he was a little, I'm not saying he was technology challenged. He just used the phone better. And then if sometimes I had more information than he had, and he'd always say, Greg, I hate it when you have more information than I do. And stuff, because things I had through my circuits. Yeah, I had planned on running for legislature probably my whole life. It just wasn't a spot. My family's always been in politics. My uncle was Speaker of the House for almost 10 years from out at Hollister. My dad was the Republican Central Committee member, or chairman, my grandfather on my mom's side was actually the Democratic chairman for the Twin Falls County.
Oh, wow.
Well, my mom was actually a Democrat. My dad was a Republican. So we
Look at that.
Had a mixed family. Back when I think you could have a mixed family. I'm not sure you could now. But I was always involved in it. And that's what led me to run for city council first, I think. But I just kept watching for an opening, and then it occurred. And so I ran. So
now let's talk about your first session. You're in your first term. You just finished your first session. What surprised you about being in the legislature?
It's probably two things. One, how busy you are. I had no idea that your day was going to start at 6. I'd be at the Capitol like 7:30, and I would never get back to where I rented to live at until 8 o'clock at night. That never, every day was that way, except for Fridays. That surprised me. And then secondarily surprised me how busy I've been since the session got out, and probably really ramping up now. I've got 2 or 3 things almost every day. This is the only day I've only got one. So as I mess with one mic here, but those 2 things surprised me. And then I'll be quite honest with you. There's people in my own party that have yelled at me in the hallway, and you're going like, man, this is amazing. I mean, sure, we disagree. I never yelled or was yelled at by a city council member that I've served with for years, but there are people that get a little too fired up, and you just have to have a thick skin and first being a principal and then city council and mayor and all that gives you a fairly thick skin that they apparently, since many of them, especially North Idaho, this is their first foray into politics. So they're sometimes a little too fired up,
a little passion in there, huh?
Yeah, they'll yell at me. So I mean, I've had it happen more than once, so now I'm getting used to it. So
have you found that most of your colleagues have been pretty welcoming?
Oh yeah, it's most everybody's pretty easy to work with on wherever they're at on the spectrum. There's one or two Democrats that I maybe don't have a conversation with very often, but the others I do. Most of my fellow Republicans I have conversations with. There's just a few that don't like me, and so I don't have very many conversations with them. I'm being honest here.
Yeah,
so,
no, that's fair. Now that you talk about being as busy as you are, what are some of the things you think are the most valuable use of your time when you're over there?
Learning how to read bills quickly, because you've got, there's 500-600 bills get introduced between the House and the Senate, and you don't have to read them until they get to your side. But yeah, I've learned to look to Section 3. I'm telling people this the other day. I said if you read a bill, first two sections are a lot of times just like fluff, not really fluff, but no real information. But get down to Section 3. That's where the nitty gritty of the bill is, and that's where if it's got something objectionable, they usually stick it in Section 3. And so I read that section. So I've kind of learned to kind of just glance over the first part and then read Section 3 and maybe 4 with detail, because that's what you're doing a lot. You're trying to do, and then finding lobbyists that you value or that you trust that they're telling you the truth, because good ones will tell you both sides. They know what the bad parts of their bill is, and they all also know the good parts of their bill. So they'll tell you both. That saves you time.
I think that's an insight that a lot of people that might not have spent a lot of time in the Capitol, this is new to them. They might have heard the word lobbyist, and it conjures up images of big dollars and bribes and smoke-filled rooms and all that. Mm-hmm. Why don't you help our listeners understand what the role of a lobbyist is, what might be the positive, and what might, as you mentioned, the cons of that?
Typically, they've brought a bill representing, they represent a lot of different groups, farmers, car dealers, mines, whatever any industry in Idaho you can think of, they have their lobbyists up there. And we call them the green tag. So their name tag is green. Ours is black. The Senate's is white. So you kind of tell who everybody is. If they've got a bill that especially if they want you to carry the bill, they'll come to you and in your office and give you details about their bill. And then I usually ask, well, who's going to be lobbying against this bill? Because they know who's going to be against it. What are they going to say to me? And they'll say it. And then when that person comes in, there are hundreds of lobbyists up there, people that are registered lobbyists all the way down from, it may be somebody representing the cities to somebody representing Monsanto, a huge corporation. So there's all levels. And for the most part, they're very congenial, and they try to just give you information. But you have to make sure you get information on both sides. And that's, there's just way more of them there. Donations, to be honest with you, once I'm to the session, I get donations from a lot of different people. I couldn't tell you the dollar amount for any of them, or even if they gave me money. I mean, you just, that part really doesn't matter. They're just trying to elect people they feel will represent their values and the things they believe in, and they're not really trying to get to say, well, I give you $500, you need to listen to me. I've never heard that, not one time.
Oh, that's helpful.
Yeah.
So there's value in having individuals that represent groups that have expertise that you may not have.
Oh yeah, I can't be knowledgeable on every industry of the state. It's just not possible. I mean, I obviously grew up on a farm, so I feel like I know a little more about that. But I'm still going to listen to the Idaho Farm Bureau and some other farm groups when they come and talk to me about a bill. I mean, I might not agree with them, but I'm going to look for their knowledge that I don't have.
Well, I think it's noteworthy you point out that, hearing both sides, that must come from the fact that you came from a household with a Democrat mother and a conservative father. Right?
Yeah. Politics were a lively discussion at the dinner table. I'll guarantee you.
I imagine.
And I read the newspaper cover to cover every day. Even as a 10-year-old, I was already reading the newspaper, but because I knew that I wanted to be able to keep up when the discussion occurred that night at the dinner table. So it was a positive experience to live and grow up in a household.
On to that point, Representative, I think there are a lot of parents out there that just don't feel comfortable navigating politics with their kids. What kind of advice would you have in this day and age where I think David Brooks had an article where, he cited 20% of people had stopped talking to a close family friend as a result of the 2020 election. Mm-hmm. And so we're finding that sometimes these conversations are alienating, they're pushing away. How can family members have positive discussions around the dinner table about politics in this day and age?
Well, what I was thinking is make it simple. I mean, make sure that you're breaking it down and make sure your knowledge is accurate as well. If you're telling your kids wrong facts, that's not doing them any good. And so, break it down into simple terms. Try not to get too much into the nuances of things. But I can't imagine. I remember working on the Goldwater's campaign, and then later reading some things of his that I thought, well, weren't quite. And then I talked to my dad about it, and he explained them to me as that makes sense to me now. And so, break it down. Make sure you think. I actually obviously followed my father's lead because I've been a lifelong Republican, but my mom tempered my views a little bit. I think I can hear her voice at times. I mean, both my parents have passed away now, but I certainly hear her voice once in a while, and certainly my grandfather on her side, because he was a little more strident Democrat than my mom was. But so I think as long as you're talking to them and making sure you're providing accurate facts, there's knowledge being gained there, and that's what you got to shoot for. You might not be into the weeds too far, but as long as you're providing accurate facts, let them make up their own mind. I mean, and once they get to be in high school, certainly they're going to be making up their own mind about things. Yeah. So,
and I'm a firm believer that more communication is always better.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Let's practice this idea of breaking things down. Then,
and I'll break it down to sort of on a family level. Try to have dinner together. I mean, that was a stalwart of my life, was that we had dinner together every night. And, especially on the farm, it might be 9:00 because you've been out changing water and that kind of stuff. But we tried to have dinner as often as possible. I think that's something we've got away from, because everybody's just eating quickly and a lot more going out to, quickly to restaurants and that kind of stuff. So I'm not saying that I want to go back to the 50s, because I don't. But I think that meeting and having a chance to talk to your kids has got to be huge.
I think that's fantastic advice. And getting home, having dinner together.
And provide your kids with chores. I'm a big one on that. I had chores my whole life, and it made me responsible. If I didn't have my chores done, I knew there was going to be, I was about to say something I shouldn't, but there was going to be something to pay if my chores weren't done when I came in at night. So, and there was chores to be done every morning. So, that's important. I mean, not everybody lives on a farm, but everybody has things that kids can be responsible
for. Sure. So you talk about breaking down policy issues that may seem complicated. Let's make them simple and have a conversation. There are a couple things you drank from the proverbial fire hose this last session when it came to a lot of things that were coming at you. Mm-hmm. Why don't you highlight some of the big ones that you're pretty happy with that happened last session?
Launch, without a doubt.
Okay, we hear a lot about launch from our guests.
Yeah.
Let's start at the beginning. What is the goal of launch?
Goal of launch is to get Idaho kids to go on to some sort of advanced training. That's the simplest form I can say. It doesn't have to be college. It doesn't have to be even a CTE program. It can be an apprentice program. It's just to get things beyond the high school diploma so that you can make more money the rest of your life. And if you're making more money, you're going to be providing more taxpayers money to the state. I mean, that's maybe a simplistic way to look at it. But it's $8,000, provide up to 80% of your costs for a couple of years of college. I was lucky. I mean, I went to CSI back when it cost $126 a semester.
Wow.
And I was living at home, and I already had military pay coming in because I was in the guards. So I came out with zero debt, but that isn't the case anymore. Sure. You can't go to CSI for $126 a semester, and you certainly can't go to the U of I. We used to cost about $2,000 or $1,500 to $2,000 for a year. And then that was all in, room and board. That's not the world it is now. And so get kids to get some sort of training, because it's designed to have Idaho kids go mostly to Idaho schools to get training and get a step up in life. Because if you look at all the statistics, if you're in high school and that's all the training you ever get in high school, you're going to make this much in your life. If you get some sort of trade school or junior college or something, you're going to make this much. And if you go on to more advanced training, even within a trade school, if you become a specialist in welding, if you become, suddenly you can do titanium and all these other exotic metals, you're going to make more than that person who just knows how to weld. So just go on, get more education, get more training.
And I imagine being in the classroom for as long as you were, and being in the principal's office, you saw firsthand how, there were probably kids that went through your programs, graduated, that didn't get to go on, didn't get to do anything.
Oh yeah. Some kids, and sometimes they just didn't want to go on. Sure. Other times they didn't have the money to go on. And so that was hard to watch somebody I thought had potential. And then, of course, when you're in the middle school, you don't get as much a chance as if, say, you're at high school, to try to help direct them to the different things that might help pay for it. But it was always, I think, we always had a lot of kids end up working for the city of Twin Falls, even when it came from Filer, like the fire department, the police department. And that's getting additional training. Both of those jobs end up paying fairly well, but it's additional training. I think that's the key. Don't worry about it if it's not college. Get something in addition that's going to make you more valuable to your employer.
Launch. We've checked it off. Right. You're happy about that. Well, we're all excited to see what that looks like as the results come in.
Right.
What are some things as you begin your second session of your first term that you're excited about tackling?
Well, one, the legislature, before I got there, the previous legislature promised $330 million, mostly to keep people voting yes on the initiative. And we didn't get $330 million to schools. We ended up about $110 million short. There's a really easy fix, and I'll be working with other legislators to make that fix. Just increase the sport unit by enough to provide schools with that other $110 million. Because a lot of them took out of reserves to pay the teachers what we promised. We promised as a legislature, the governor, to pay the teachers X amount of money, but we didn't quite provide enough to do that. So they had to find their own sources, funds, either a levy or reserves or whatever it was. So let's get that $110 million to them, and then we'll go from there. And maybe we can cut back on the levies. That was the whole purpose of $330 million. Right. Cut back on levies, because that's one of the things that keeps property taxes where we're higher than we'd like them to be. Nobody likes taxes, but I think most of us realize that there's going to be some taxes. I kind of like the Army to be in place. I kind of want the roads to work well. I want the schools to be funded. So those all cost money. So
getting our schools funded properly, another important thing you're going to be working on. We talked briefly about, some of the growth in our communities has brought new challenges and new issues. You're supportive of potentially some stricter punishments on those that are out dealing fentanyl.
Fentanyl is the new, it may be the new designer drug. I'm just sure it's just incredibly dangerous. There's been a movement, not towards the users as much as the dealers.
Sure.
And with some minimum sentencing, minimum sentencing, I guess would be the term you use. I'm willing to compromise. Others aren't. That's the reason it couldn't make it through. I'm willing to compromise and say, all right, maybe we lower the minimum sentence for marijuana dealing or something along that line if we get the fentanyl in, because fentanyl's far more dangerous. Everybody I've talked to that's had somebody who died from it didn't even realize they were taking fentanyl. It just was added to something else they were taking, and that's dangerous to me. That's scary to me. Of course, I'm not using illegal drugs, but I can see that we're not going to stop it completely. So we got to make it, if that makes sense, make it safer. If we can make it fentanyl. I mean, Twin Falls is we've found that our police departments have found pound after pound after pound. It's not for Twin Falls; it's traveling through, because we've got the Highway 93 coming north and the interstate going through, and it's just kind of a crossroads of where it ends up being in our area, for at least for a short time. I hope it's moving on through, but that doesn't do anybody else down the road. So
yeah, and there's so many heartbreaking stories that come with that. And we could really get into that. There's a lot of policy questions that I had that I wanted to ask you. But I'm going to throw a question at you that you're definitely not ready for, that I've been dying. We had a lively discussion before the mic started and the video started rolling about college football.
Okay.
Representative, if we had you running the NCAA football for a day, how would you fix the nightmare of the conference realignments?
Oh, man. You've definitely hit me of the...
Have I stumped you there?
I would bring back the Pac-12. That's for sure.
Okay.
I mean, the fact that the entire West Coast of the United States does not have a Power 5 conference is disturbing to me. That's been such a, nobody in our schools here in Idaho are in that, but we certainly follow the Pac-12 because it's
right.
Western United States. I'd figure out some way to bring back the Pac-12. I'm going to blame the TV networks for us losing the Pac-12. It may be an opportunity for Boise State. I don't know, to move into a new, really refigured Pac-12, but it still needs it. And for Oregon and Oregon State not play anymore, Washington State, the Apple Cup, the Civil War, those are going away. It's kind of like, what the heck? That makes no sense to me. So,
have you received any calls about the Boise State football vacancy? Are you considering it?
No, I'm certainly not. I haven't been any calls. I'd be upset, but I haven't been any calls about wanting me to take it over. I did coach high school football at one point in my life, but that's a surprise as well there. I thought it might happen at the end of the year. I'm not sure it makes sense in the middle of the year.
Right.
And I'm also starting to worry about, as a legislator, these multi-year contracts. The Jimbo Fisher gets $75 million.
God, paid out.
And Mr. Avalos getting $3.3 million to walk out. Maybe we need to think about a possibility of shortening the terms of contracts so that whenever we're dissatisfied with someone, but maybe when you've got a winning record and you get sent down the road, because overall he's had a winning record, maybe that's not very fair either. So I guess you have to look at both sides.
I say put it all in incentives. Don't pay him a penny until they win the playoff. They got to go all the way.
Win the conference.
There you go, something.
Yeah.
Now, a tougher question for you.
Okay.
We always ask the legislators when they come on, what is the one place that they would recommend that somebody needs to stop and eat at if they're traveling through your district?
Well, I'm gonna go with the obvious choice. Other people might come up with a different one. Can I give you two?
We'll allow it. Yeah.
All right. The one, if you want to have a spectacular view, is a place called Elevation 486. The name comes from the canyon is 486 feet. It's right perched on the edge of the canyon. Has some pretty good food, and the view is spectacular. If you want just an old rustic steakhouse, you got to go to the Rock Creek. It's clear over on Addison, and that's an old-timey steakhouse place that is still one of my favorites. I like to go there. I always go there on my birthday.
Oh, okay.
Where you want to go for your birthday? I'm going to go to the Rock Creek because I can see the view most any time. But the Rock Creek, you get that old-fashioned, good, solid prime rib and a ribeye and that kind of thing.
Yeah,
I'm a steak eater. Obviously, grew up on a farm ranch.
There you go.
And we didn't grow sheep. We grow cattle. So that thing.
Those are two great recommendations. You were prepared for that. Sometimes we stump people. This question gets people often to a book that you would recommend that everyone maybe ought to read in their life.
Oh, I'm going to have to remember the name of it. I'm a Dean Koontz fan. If you haven't read Dean Koontz, he's kind of like Stephen King light. He's not quite as scary as Stephen King. There's a series. Something about the end of the night or something like that. There's a 2-book series, and I keep waiting for him to come out with the third one, and it's been like 20 years, so he's probably not going to. About a young man who can. No, actually, I'm getting 2 books put together. I've read a lot of Dean Koontz, so I'm getting 2 books. One of them is one where it's kind of like you can see dead people.
Oh, okay.
And it's if you read Dean Koontz and just put dead people in there or Google, it'll come up, and he can see people after they've died, and he helps them find a resolution in their life. But especially if they were murdered, that one's kind of an interesting one. But
we'll take it.
But anything with Dean Koontz is going to be, especially the older stuff. The newer stuff I struggle with, but the old stuff is really good.
All right, Dean Koontz, older stuff.
Yeah.
Representative, we started today talking about your time on the farm out in Hollister. Heard a great story about you and cousin Bob shooting a main line. Your distaste.
I didn't shoot the main line. Bob shot the main line.
Thank you for correcting me on that.
And he did get off the road. I want people don't think we were shooting from the road, or he was.
Guilty by association, though.
Yeah.
We talked about your time in the service, what you learned there. We got into your time as a principal and as an educator. and how that's affected you and your ability to serve in the legislature, some of the things you're surprised at in the legislature. We talked launch. We talked about making sure our schools get funded and working on some reforms. Heard about some great restaurants from you and how you'd fix college football. So we've had a lot of things we've covered. We've got a lot of things we didn't cover that we're going to have you back for. Mayor of Twin Falls, served on the city council. You are fighting for local control, but also ensuring our agriculture is protected and safe. Representative, as we wrap up here today, what is the one thing you would kind of leave our listeners with about coming from a former educator, a current public servant who's given us some great advice about eating dinner with the family and doing chores? What other words of wisdom can you give us as we wrap up today?
Contact your legislators, and not through the one-click politics and those robo things. Write me a personal email, and if you're from my district, you will hear back from me. And so write me an email and let me know how you feel on a lot of the issues that will be coming back to us. I'm sure the library bill will in some form will come back, the vouchers or ESAs, whatever you want to call them, those kind of things. Let me know how you feel, because I will write you back and we'll let you, talk about what you're feeling, and maybe if you have a misunderstanding of the bill, I can clear that up, or if I have a misunderstanding, you can clear it up for me. So yeah, I would say write your legislators a personal email, or a letter. I doubt I'll get a letter. Nobody does that anymore, but a personal email, not through one of your organizations you're a member of. You just have to put your name in and they send me a standard email that's all the same. I get 100 of them by the same thing. There was one last year that came in. We were getting the same email every 10 seconds.
Oh, wow.
onto my house email, and it just tied it up so you couldn't do business. You're always trying to get rid of this email that's in your way and read it. So yeah, send me a personal email. Let me know. And even if you're not in my district, I'll still read it, but I may not have time to answer because I get a lot of emails. But send me an email and let me know how you think. Personal email, make it a paragraph. I'm not going to read a book because I get hundreds of emails a day, but I will read it if it's a personal email.
I think that's great advice. Reach out to your legislator.
Sure.
Give them your purview.
I'm sure everybody's pretty much the same. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
To the farm boy from Hollister, Representative Greg Lanting, thanks so much for being here. We're going to have you back. There's so many things we didn't talk about.
Oh, thank you very much, Brennan. I certainly appreciated the time to get my thoughts out to people, and maybe people get to know me a little better.
Absolutely. Till next time.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.